Okay, so today we're having Elder Wisdom 2, which, as I mentioned when we had Elder Wisdom 1, we have a lot of wise people in this congregation, which is why we had to go to Elder Wisdom 2 to get as many in as possible. Now that'll give it's a total of 8, and then we'll keep on adding through the years so we can get all the wise people's information. We're lucky today. We have with us Barb Kelly, Sue Dailey, Charlie Moore, and right here, although not visible yet, Jan Magree is practicing with the choir, and she'll be back. So I'm going to just mention to you what these folks were asked to speak about, which was oh dear, I brought the wrong one over. All right, thank you very much. The brief overview of life experiences that they want to share, how they came to be a Unitarian, any special memories of UUCD, any committee or board work that they especially wanted to mention, and what keeps them coming back. In addition, I've asked people if they want to say something about their own children. Many Unitarians' children no longer are Unitarians, and so, and maybe some are. I just don't happen to know any. So anyway, if they want to mention that, that would be wonderful. But before we start with Barb here, I just want to say a special we're thinking of you to Carol Michelson, because Carol is a member of the Forums Committee, a long time member of the Forums Committee. And I think almost everybody knows she had a fall not long ago. And she is on the mend, but sadly, her husband had a fall and is in the hospital. So let's keep her in our thoughts as we do this today. So I'm going to ask that Barb start, and we'll do our best, everybody trying to speak up so we can hear it. And thank you, Barb.
And for the early morning thrill cam, I'm doing the hello Zoom land.
Okay. I was born here in Duluth, and I was raised in a Lutheran church, not Missouri Synod, just what I would call mainstream Lutheran. So I know all the characters. I know the little family, you know, Joseph and Mary and the kid Jesus and all the disciples, the good ones and the bad ones. I mean, this is good information for everybody to know. We're a Christian nation, so we should understand those things, I guess. How I came to Unitarianism, well, that would be through my husband, John Kelly. And many of you remember John Kelly. Thank you very much. He was memorable, of course. He came from Akron, Ohio, where he was a member of the church there, where Gordon McKeeman was the minister. And I mention that name because that's well known to many people, because he was our national UUA president at one time. So it should ring some faint bell to some of you. Let's see, what am I? Special memories. Well, I have the best one. They gave me my wedding. We didn't have ministers in those days, and so we had to come up with something for the services all the time and get speakers. And John and my late husband had gone to Sioux Falls, South Dakota to get married. Who would have thought Sioux Falls was more liberal than Duluth? But at the time it was. You couldn't marry in Minnesota for a year till you've been a year after your divorce. And a lot of people, that's a long time because you don't get a divorce right away. People are separated, and in my case it had already been a year, and then there would be another year. So that was kind of punitive, I thought. So we went there and got married. We came back, and we didn't have a minister, so they're kind of hard up for what to do on Sunday morning. So they decided, well, we'll just have a wedding again one Sunday. So they gave us a wedding, and we had a party. I know Mari Seitz baked a ham, and my father bought wine, and we had a big party. And that's how we've always been. um, committee involvement, music. I've been on the music committee for a long time. Again, being small, if you came to choir, you didn't know for sure if you're going to do a solo or a quartet or something. And often that was it, maybe 4 or 5 people. There was never a solo, but we were small, but we still carried on. Let's see. What else? What else do you want to know? Why do I come back? Because of you. People here are wonderful. And I made a lot of friends here, and it's a good place to be. That's about it. That probably wasn't long enough, but it's okay.
It's okay.
Thank you.
Did you want to mention something about your daughter's involvement?
Oh, my daughter Moira, well, we got her to come because we paid her. She did the nursery for a little fee, and so she came every Sunday, and she got to know at least the young people. And I guess if she was asked now, she'd say she was Unitarian. She's not involved, but she certainly, that's what she thinks of and what her philosophy is. You want to know any more? She has 2 daughters.
No,
No, you don't want, you want to know them? No.
That's up to you.
No, that's all right.
Do you want me to just move it, or do you want to
I
talk?
think, so, thank you, Barb. for
You're
sharing.
welcome.
And now Sue Dailey, longtime member, and I think maybe a more.
Yeah, I'll go into that.
All right, very good.
I think she said long, too long.
Hi, I'm Sue Dailey. In today's language, you would say I came from a mixed marriage, but we didn't think of it at the time. My father was a descendant of the Mayflower, grew up in Massachusetts, and my mother was from a Jewish family in Albany, Georgia. And in the interest of time, I'm going to skip over how they met and the story and the wonderful story of how they met and how they got married. But they settled in the North, first in Washington, D.C. During World War II, when my father was exempt because of flat feet and worked for the Ration Board. And then they moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where they had children. And when my sister was school age, rather than either of them insist on holding their faith, my mother went church shopping and settled on the Unitarian Church there. And so that's why I was raised Unitarian. My sister and I were raised Unitarian. Like, the most powerful part of that upbringing for me was in the 60s with the youth group, which was the Liberal Religious Youth, or the LRY. Oh,
Sue,
okay.
I know this is
I'm
hard,
gonna-
but try to talk as loudly as you can.
Okay, is this better?
Can you
Oh, talk
hear
louder
back
for the
there?
people here. Aha, I was talking to
Our
the,
mics are broken, and so please do come up to the front if you would like.
And the
okay,
choir-
I'll try to talk louder. Is this better?
That's
Okay. So I was very active in junior high and high school with the Liberal Religious Youth. We had we're an mostly all white church. We had a black advisor to the youth group, And we had, in being in New England, we had youth conferences regularly all over New England as a great opportunity to meet other UUs, to talk about mostly moral issues, civic issues, family issues, staying up late at night talking about different family stuff, anything. It was, we got together after conferences and marched in Boston. We met for civil rights activities at that time. It was, we drew in kids from other churches because we were a fun and active and vibrant place to be. So the youth group holds a deep place in my heart as something that is powerful for the development of civic-minded, conscientious young people. Like many in my age group, once we left high school and went off to college, we dropped out of church. We slept in on Sunday morning. We didn't go to church. I didn't come back to church until after I was I had lived on the range, I was off the grid, I'd had a couple of kids in a house that didn't have electricity.
Really off the
And
grid.
I was, as an anti-war activist, I married a college friend of mine who was an anti-war Vietnam veteran. And that was in a way a part of my understanding of that anti-war movement, is that he was the other side of the anti-war movement. Gave me an understanding of what was happening over there. But he struggled and had struggled with alcohol, struggled with PTSD, and in the process of living in that marriage and then having children and still living quite isolated while working full time, I found that I didn't know what I wanted anymore. I didn't know, I kind of lost my identity and ended up losing my job. And can you hear me?
Oh, that's
And after losing my job, we moved from the Iron Range down to Duluth, to the land of greater opportunity. And my children, my oldest girl was 5 at that point, and that seemed like a good time to go to church. So I came with the girls to 1802 First Street, partly for them, but largely for myself. And Karen Gustafson was the minister then, and it was a godsend for me to reconnect with who I was, with the UU in me. I needed that reconnection with my values in order to get back to who I was and how to go through this marriage, what to do with my life. So coming back to UU was a really important period for me. Although that's, let's see. I started off on the Religious Education Committee, helping with Sunday school. And then later on, when we started, when we got involved in wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, Hal Bertelson and I started the Peace and Justice Committee, and then drew in more people to put UUCD on the map in the community. What keeps me coming back? I am frustrated with the term of we just speak to the choir. I think it's important for us to stick with the choir, to talk with the choir, to get more concerned, to get more aware of how to express ourselves and how to understand what's going on, because we never know what kind of ripple effects we're going to have once we learn how to express ourselves and once we go out and try it out more. And we don't know who we're going to move, who we're going to inspire. And in the meantime, we don't know who we're going to draw into that choir. That's how the choir grows. So speaking up is important. And in the meantime, it's fun and energizing for us. As far as kids go, my older daughter, Emily, called last night, so I had the chance to ask her. She's now in St. Paul. She's raising two little boys, 7 and 10 now. They're doing hockey, so they are very busy and don't go to church on Sunday. I asked her what she thought of why she wasn't going to church. And she very quickly gave me this answer: I'm not afraid of burning in hell. But then she went on and said a lot of other things. She learned about other religions. She explored things that she thought were true, but she learned that they might not be. So she learned a lot of questioning.
The question is the answer.
The question, I had a daughter with the button. To question is the answer. And having deeper conversations weekly was also valuable to her. I think that's enough. I could go on.
So thank you so much for sharing. There's a lot of meat there. Thank you so much. Now we have to move the computer and we'll get ready for Charlie Moore, and when you see Bruce Holman, thank him profusely for fixing the microphones.
Well, I have a disclaimer or disclosure to start with. I'm certainly an elder by age, but in this community, I'm real rookie. So anyway, in line with this month's worship theme, I'm going to sort of center my talks about what have been transformative times in my life. The first of these was in late August of 1964, when I started medical school in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Now, Ann Arbor, for me, was a collision of my conservative upbringing in the Midwest and radical liberalism from the East Coast. But more importantly, Ann Arbor was the start of, Diana would say, my obsessive curiosity with medicine. Learning, studying how the body works, how it doesn't work, and then using that information to solve a problem that a patient presents you with. That challenge was always there. But just as important was it enabled me to share with hundreds of people a very intimate time in their lives when they were very challenged with what was going on. And that was a real privilege to do that. The second date was in late April of 1968. It's about 4 years later, when Lady Di and I started to get to know one another. And that magic, that caring, that passion has not ebbed. An personal anecdote that made me realize this was we were down in Omaha at the College World Series, and it was in between games, and there was a local brewery nearby, and we were having a beer. And this total stranger came up and said, care if I ask you a question? And of course, we said no. He said, how long have you known one another? And I said, well, it's a little over 50 years. And he said, well, you know, you two have this ease of talking to one another like people have been together a long time. The third date was actually two, June of 1974 and June of 1976. And that's when our son and daughter were born. And I didn't realize how much your kids' joys and sorrows, their successes and failures, how much that involves a parent. The second thing about kids was how over the years our relationship has evolved. The fourth transformative period was when I became a UU. Now, how did I do that? Well, it's probably one Sunday I was reading the paper and Dinah said, why don't you come to church with me? So I did. Now, since I've been here, I was on the board with Sue. The last year I was on the board, I was treasurer. And thanks to a number of people, I didn't put the church in financial ruin. Giger Yant, Kathy Stinnett, and the previous treasurer, Cheryl Goldberg, held my hand and helped me not do that. Been on the Finance Council since, did a pledge drive, was chairman of the pledge drive twice, and of course, the rummage sale. Now, what all of those things have done is helped me become a part of this community. The sharing of working together has enabled me to do that. Now, and that leads into why I stick around. It is such a privilege to be in this community. People really walk their talk here. And another anecdote that maybe illustrates a little bit why community is so important. My dad died when I was 6 months old. And so my mom was faced with raising my sister and I. I came to realize that one of the things that gave her strength was her Christian belief and her church community. And I think it's been since I've been a part of this church community that I've realized how important that is. The second reason I stick around is our principles. As President Biden said, his State of the Union speech this week, this is a hard time right now. This is for our country, for the world, and it really helps to have helps me to have a moral compass as to gauge my actions, my beliefs. The third reason is the ministers we've had. Since I've been here, there have been we've had five ministers, one settled minister and four interim ministers. And I've certainly learned from all of them. I certainly am going to miss Jill. I think she has an incredible talent for what she does. I was going to close by talking about an interesting article I read this week in the New England Journal, but Diana said that wasn't such a good idea. So I'll close by just saying thank you for letting me be a part of this congregation.
We do indeed have wonderful elders here. And we're going to begin with Jen Magree, who was going to sit in seat number 1 because she was going to sing in the choir, and then she rethought that, and she's now in seat number 4, so she would be able to speak. So over to you, Jen.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, when we realized what we were going to be singing today, I realized, no, I can't be first. That's when we're going to have to do something special that you will see. So I just have to second what Charlie said, that whole second part. I could give up the last half of mine and say that was his. So brief overview of any life experience you wish to share. I don't know how many people really know this, but I have moved 14 times in my lifetime. I've lived in 5 states and 2 foreign countries, so that has certainly changed my perspective on things compared to people who have been born and raised in Duluth and not been around too much. And I encounter that kind of thing all the time. It's like, okay, well, I've seen more, so I'm just going to keep my mouth shut most of the time. How I came to Unitarianism, we were living in Minneapolis in 1963 when the beginnings of the Vietnam War were starting to show. And we were attending we were members of the Richfield Methodist Church. And the minister there had been an Air Force chaplain. And the first thing that came out of his mouth was prayers and concern for the military as things were starting in Vietnam. And we couldn't believe what was coming. It was really difficult. And in the newspaper, we saw something from John Cummins from the First Universalist Church, and we didn't know what Unitarian Universalism was all about. But he was giving classes for conscientious objectors who wanted to be sure that John Cummins wanted to be sure that they were on the right track for when they were interviewed. And so he was helping them explore their feelings and express what they meant. And we thought, okay, this is the place we need to check out. In the meantime, we were preparing for Christmas music, and I'm in the choir. I've always been a singer. So I was just torn because I really wanted to do the music. But my husband was already gone. He would come drop me off with the kids and leave and go to the Unitarian church and then come back and pick me up later. And, he started talking to people and he'd be late and I'd be waiting with the kids. So that's basically how we got into this. When we went to Europe, it was with my husband's work with UNIVAC, putting mainframe computers in and getting them up and running all over Western Europe. And of course, there was nothing there. We really missed having the Unitarian Universalist Church in our life, stayed supportive of the church. And when we came back in 1974, we went back to the church, and John Cummins said to us, well, what do you think? And I said, well, it's a lot different. He said, I can't change the past for you. And then he quickly said, there's a place out in Minnetonka that really needs members to support its growth. and we had bought a house in Plymouth, so we started going to the Wayzata Church. And there, it really was a struggling place, and I was president of the congregation at one point. I literally called every single member and lots of friends of the church over the summer before I was going to be president and said, please think about how you would like to contribute. And we managed to get a coterie of people together to put the church back on a track for success. And now there's a brand new church, well, not brand new anymore, but it's a church in along 394, just before you get to Wayzata, which is doing beautifully and growing well and sustained well. So that's a nice success. So when I came to this church and we were trying to do all this new stuff, build the building, we were down at the YWCA, I thought, the way I want to contribute, I really don't want to be in the leadership, but I want to be in the background, supporting the infrastructure, making sure things are there that support what we're doing. So I've been on the personnel committee that was started by one of our former presidents, who now runs the Duluth Folk School. He said, we need a personnel committee. We need something to support all of the different functions of the church. So I got involved in that, and then I've always been involved in music. So one of the things that Sally said was she wanted to know about the kids' involvement. So our kids grew up in Europe, basically, and we did a lot of touring of cathedrals and seeing a lot of different kinds of things as a tourist would. But when they didn't really have any religious education. And when we came back, our daughter got involved briefly in the nursery. And so she did that for her senior year of high school as a nursery attendant. And so far as she's concerned, she and her husband started a new business quite young. And she went and talked to the minister of the place closest, the church out of the 13 in the Twin Cities, the place closest to where they lived. And she said, we're starting this business and we know that a church needs support and we're not in a position to support it. And the minister said, well, you do what you need to do and come back when you can. Well, in the meantime, they never really came back, but they have certainly stuck with Unitarian Universalist principles from my daughter's perspective and really gone into a lot of the Native American spirituality and the nature spirituality. My son, on the other hand, has lived in Japan since 94 and had been there for 4 years previously. He's still there and he supports the church in Wayzata. He's still up with them. He did the youth group stuff. He was involved with Ben Borton when he was a minister here with the youth groups getting up to the Boundary Waters together. All I can say is if my son and his family came back here, which they probably won't because of the pandemic at this point, they would probably be involved, but not our daughter or her children. So what keeps me coming back is, as Charlie said, the community, the support, and every time we've moved, we found a new congregation, in this country anyway. We've been in 4 different Unitarian Universalist congregations, and we found the same kind of thirst for knowledge, curiosity, willingness to work and to support each other. And so that was something that we came to just as soon as we moved to Duluth, is find the church, see who's there, and this is where we are.
So, thank you. What a lot of rich information. Thank you all for sharing so much. We're going to take questions. If anybody would like to ask a question, this is the time. Do I see a hand? Usually Mr. Munger always has a question, I guess.
I got a comment. I would like to congratulate the old guy sitting next to me for making it to the senior.
Okay.
Yes. I was going to mention that today is Barb.
I think he's 5 years older than me.
That is correct. Now you self-congratulations, yeah. So, anybody have a question for anybody who spoke? All right,
I could add a couple of things.
all right, Sue said she has some more information. I'm always glad to hear whatever you say.
Louise had a question.
Oh.
Maybe I can wait till after you see. Okay, well, this is also more of a comment than a question. Is that allowed?
Yes.
Since the comments are the vibe of the morning. I am so happy to whomever came up with this idea to have our older people speak. I'm thrilled beyond belief that we have so many new families and younger people joining our community, many of whom don't know me and don't even care. And I don't mean that in a sort of pejorative way, but more like there's just a lot of people around and I'm just another gray-haired individual. But I think what I see represented here is my history, having grown up in this community, moving here at the age of 9 when I babysat Barb's child, as I recall. And just thinking about, I think a lot about objects that I have in my home that belong to members of this community who have died. I have a lovely couch that belonged to Adele High, Warren High's mother. I have a sweater of hers and a romper thing that I've worn to have holes in it. I have some fine cocktail glasses that belong to Shirley Zaburl, and I have Tiny Mimi's sewing machine and an etched reindeer bone piece of jewelry. And I look at those things and they're just things that if you were to walk into my house, they would just be things among things, but they represent my connection to people who my parents forged relationships with, and I see those in the material pieces that are around my house. So I'm really, I love what I see here, and I'm so embarrassed that I missed the other week when my mother was up there. But I love what we see, and I love how you articulated that. So you're all older and elders, but you came into the community at different times, and so you represent and you have different insights into what this community has been, is, and may become, and I really, really respect and appreciate that.
And look, I heard your mother wants to say something.
Louise, thank you for those remarks and for acknowledging that you did grow up in this congregation. I was one of the elders at that first session, and I said that when we were considering moving here, we checked to see if there would be a UU congregation for our children to grow up in. I'm wondering, Louise, the 3 women you mentioned that you have these cherished items from, what's that relationship? What's the structure that brought that on?
Now you're.
It's over to you.
But this isn't about me, though. It's about them. Okay. Yes, ma'am. So my relationship to those 3 women. Yeah. I did not. Well, Adele was an ersatz grandmother because my grandmothers had died. Tiny was this odd thing I didn't understand because I didn't understand the Finns when we moved here. I was going to school with kids with last names that started with S-E-N or ended with S-E-N and S-O-N, and that made sense to me, but the multiple consonants and syllables next to each other, I didn't get that. And then I realized those were the Finns. So Tiny represented this thing about Minnesota history that I didn't know, and the Finnish immigrant history and how that connects to Unitarian Universalist principles. And then, oh, and Shirley, wow, Shirley was a fiery redhead who represented yet another immigrant history story to Minnesota. And her husband, Louis Zabrel, from whom Zabrel's bar is named in Ely. And they all, well, Adele was much, much older than the rest of them. But they were parts of that like 1970s, 80s thing of UUism where services were really lectures. We were a very academic, intellectual community, and we really didn't have we didn't have much comfort with spirituality and thinking
God's frozen people.
about things, and that's reflected in my spiritual growth too, where I really grooved on the intellectual component of our services back then and really didn't want to talk about those other components of being a human. And sometime in the 90s, Unitarian Universalism, or the UUA, became much more, the spiritual aspect of our lives has become a part of services. So those three women represent both parts of Minnesota and Minnesota history, and then how Unitarian Universalism has evolved over the decades that I've been part of it.
I wanted to,
I heard my name, but I didn't hear anything else.
Apparently Louise and Peter are going to be chatting more about this. So Sue wanted to make a few comments, and then I know Kathy is going to want to talk about next week's forum. Is that correct? Yes.
I wanted to mention a little bit more about youth group and conferences, otherwise known in recent years as cons. Both of my daughters went to youth group cons and got a lot out of them. I've already kind of described what my older daughter thought about it. Her first impression when she went to cons that were statewide, or sometimes in Wisconsin, sometimes in Iowa, how she encountered people her own age who she saw as weird compared to the people she knew in Duluth. And yet that was, I mean, people with different hair, different tattoos, different jewelry, whatever. And that was eye-opening for her. And took her understanding of people, even her own age, as she, in her words, to a whole new level. She said people were weird, and it was a lot of fun. My younger daughter went to cons also, and was a very different child who often was accused of being weird and felt like an outsider and felt like she did not belong. And it was through repeated visits to cons that she decided it was okay to be weird. And it was an important experience for her to accept herself, which has been a journey for her. Sadly, and we also went to, we were invited to youth group activity up in Thunder Bay by the youth group up there. And that was held at a cabin on a lake. So all of these experiences have widened and enriched my children. And sadly, my younger daughter has always regretted that she couldn't talk. She got to the point where she went to the last con that I think our youth group has been involved in. And I would love to see our youth group expand and get energized and get back into those kinds of connections with youth, with other UU youth.
Sue, thank
Around.
you, and thank you to Barb